is the secret of defense. Defense is the planning of an attack. Lord Admiral Ravensburg believes that we can learn something of our enemy's strategy by infiltrating a Chaos command ship recently identified by Inquisitor Horst's agents. I am to find this ship, board it, and bring back any clues I can find about the invaders' plans. Now is my chance to ensure their faith in me was not misplaced.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another Critical Rocket review. Today we're going to be taking a look at Battlefleet Gothic Armada from Tinderlost Interactive, and it's published by Focus Home Interactive. So, Battlefleet Gothic is a real-time strategy game based in the now sadly shelved Warhammer 40k tabletop game of the same name, Battlefleet Gothic. It focuses on the battles in the space battlefield, I guess, between fleets of ships from the many different races of the universe, with the story focusing on the Imperial Navy battling to keep the armada of Abaddon the Despoiler from destroying the Gothic sector, all while fending off the rampaging Orcs and those sneaky Eldar Corsairs. The story acts as your, the usual tutorial, introduces you to the game's mission types as you play from the perspective of Admiral Spire, a young Imperial officer tasked with keeping order in the Gothic sector. So the campaign plays out across an ever-expanding set of subsectors that gradually come under attack by the enemies of the Empire, and I was immediately reminded of games like XCOM with how the structure is laid out for the choice of missions. Every planet in the sector has a benefit to you in some small way, and losing them means that the enemy become even more aggressive the longer they're left to their own devices. So turns only allow for a certain number of actions, so you have to weigh each choice carefully. Like, do you allow the Orcs to rampage across a sector a little more for a turn while they gain more power, just to stem the Eldar threat who may be causing you more trouble, or do you kind of split your attacks on both of them? You'll slow them down a little, but you won't completely stop them. Sadly, that you can't stop every attack, and you get priority missions that demand that you complete them before anything else is done. These missions usually are something a little different from the standard battle types, like you'll have to defend a damaged vessel while it repairs, or securing an artifact, and they generally play like a version of the existing missions, but they're nice to have them as well, with the sort of open-ended structure, because failing a mission isn't necessarily a complete loss. It is with some, obviously, ones that are important, but most of them aren't, and it means you don't end up with a game over. You just get fewer rewards from that specific mission, which was nice, because if you find a mission that's a bit too tough for you, it's not like you're going to get frustrated and get stuck because you're locked in. You can just keep trying it, which is nice. Overall, though, the missions do stick to a designated structure that you'll see in the skirmish and the multiplayer game types anyway. I like the map, and in a way, I think the game would have benefited actually from being an open playstyle, kind of like, I think it's Soulstorm from Dawn of War, that allowed you to play as any of the races and you had to conquer the planet. Well, I think this would have really worked if you could have conquered the entire subsector as one of the 4 races, like taking planets of each mission and having to deal with them, like counter-attacking you and stuff. That would have been cool. Maybe they'll do that as a DLC, or maybe it'll be in a sequel, but yeah, overall the campaign is fun, and it will take you a while to get through before you move on to the multiplayer and the skirmish anyway. So the main thrust of the game is obviously the combat. It becomes very clear which race is best for you once you've tried them out a little bit. Now, I've sunk about 30 hours each into the game in total, and I found that every race has a very distinct style of play with their own advantages and disadvantages that generally I felt they meant something during the battles. Like, the Imperials are very jack of all trades, but they don't really excel in any one area, so they're a really safe choice, and because you're playing them in the sort of single player campaign, you get used to them first. I found the Chaos are very ranged focused. They don't do well close up. Their ships aren't as resistant to damage as the Imperial ships, but they have fantastic fighters and bombers. They can just send wave after wave out and do great damage. The Orcs, on the other hand, are very, very, very short range. Their weapons are very inaccurate. They have a preference for boarding actions and lightning strikes, and they love to ram. It's one of the best features of the game, is just ramming stuff. And the drawback I found with the Orcs is they're quite slow. Once you activate their ramming ability, you can't really turn it off until they run out of fuel, and they have virtually no armor on the rear of their ships. And then you've got the Eldar, who have the physically weaker vessels in the game, but they're very, very fast. They do a lot of damage when they fire with their proud weapons, but they lack any kind of broadside, which means you have to kind of almost pen them in to stop them from using their maneuverability by using environmental objects, or even just trapping them on the edge of the map. But the Eldar do struggle when their fire is split, so sometimes actually splitting your fleet up to attack works a bit better. So, battles take place on a grid map that I'm assuming that this was kind of meant to be reminiscent of the tabletop, but it doesn't really mean anything in this game. It's just literally to show you the kind of physical boundaries of the play space. But you can control everything with mouse and keyboard, typical stuff. When things get hectic, it's possible to virtually stop the game. You can put it into what's called a tactical cogitator, which is basically just slow-mo. And it allows you to designate orders to each individual ship, altering their course, using special abilities, picking specific targets, or even getting out of the way of torpedoes, that kind of thing. And it's also good for when you want to micromanage quite a lot, which you have to do with some races like the Eldar, for instance. But the cool thing is you can set abilities to auto-use and just let the AI decide when they're going to use them, so you can play it kind of at your own pace. You can let it sort of be very, very fast, so you can slow everything down a lot and keep micromanaging all your ship's movements. It's nice that you can choose how invested in the action you get in that way. Now, to someone who was a fan of it, this isn't a one-to-one recreation of the tabletop, though. If you're hoping it's going to be, you're going to be disappointed. It's an action adaptation, so yeah, it's fast. Most of the mechanics don't translate to the same way they did on tabletop, so if you're looking for a digital version of Gothic, this isn't it. But that isn't to say this isn't a bad adaptation. It's far from it. The gameplay's good. I found that it was quite rewarding and it's fun, even against the AI. Ramming ships, just going full thrust is brilliant. Just seeing them spin out from with the physics engine is amazing. And the way sometimes you can domino ships into each other and pin them around is cool. And its positioning is quite key. Using your different skills and abilities can be pretty important when you want to win some intense battles. Post-match, win or lose, you'll receive renown, which is what you use to buy new ships, upgrade existing ones, and you unlock more slots to put even more ships in. This is where I found this part of the game to be a bit of a mixed bag. The ships have a number of tabs that detail skills: favours, crew, upgrade. And skills and favours require renown to unlock, as do the upgrades. And favours are my favourite part for me. Each race has 4 specific favours to choose from. Chaos, for example, have the 4 gods of Khorne, Slaanesh, Tzeentch and Nurgle. And each one grants them specific abilities and buffs. But most importantly, is they alter the ship visually. So there's nothing cool in having a fleet of Khorne ships blasting the crap out of it and like sending demonic invaders to the other ship and just like slaughtering the crew. That's really cool. Having a Nurgle ship that has like a miasma of just like disease and like horrible flies and stuff, and they fly over and they literally eat the ship's armor away. So it doesn't matter if you've got shields, if you get too close to a Nurgle ship you take damage. It's really cool, and the different races have their own things. So like the Imperial Navy have Astartes, where they get Terminators and Space Marines, and they've got things like Adeptus Mechanicus, and the Eldar have got like Biel-Tan and Ulfway, and the Orcs have got all their different clans. So there's a really cool aspect. I liked that, being able to kind of tailor your little fleets visually to a specific theme. Skills, however, I found to be fairly lackluster and not interesting enough to pick from any beyond a couple of the no-brainers. Things like being able to make your shields invulnerable for a few seconds, or being able to like drop plasma mines around that do really good damage. The others I didn't find make any real difference. I didn't see them being worth the renown cost. Crew skills I found also made very little difference in-game. Honestly, having a max rank Master Gunner compared to a starting Master Gunner seemed to be quite negligible, and I don't think it reflected the difference in a crew's level, like a ship being level 8 compared to a ship that's level 1. The crew didn't really seem to make any real difference. It was the upgrades that made the big difference, and I felt like the ship upgrades should have been what the crew upgrades were doing. Maybe either just merging those two together or just swapping them around, because granting buffs like faster turning speed, higher accuracy at longer ranges, more hit points to the ship are all things I think the crew should have been giving the ship, rather than just generic upgrades that everyone could have. And when you buy a new ship, they can buy an upgrade straight away, so the crew didn't make all that much of a difference. That aside though, I felt the ships each have a specific role on the field. The Orcs benefit from being custom built by the player to fit the roles it wants. Some races have more choice than others. I find this is probably a drawback from the tabletop selection at the time. The Eldar were pretty limited in choice. They have like one battle cruiser, one battleship, a couple of cruisers, whereas The Imperials and the Chaos just have like 4 or 5 options each in most of their sort of ship classes. Hopefully though, Tindalos might be able to expand that roster. I'm not like a hardcore fan, but of the original tabletop, I never played it, but I don't know if Tindalos, or maybe they've been given free reign to add new ships. Be interesting to see. So anyway, I'll get onto the missions now, which range from straight up cruiser battles between fleets, or more tactical affairs like defending a convoy or attacking a convoy, defending against planetary bombardment or vice versa, or assassinating an enemy ship. So max team sizes are 2v2, but this makes for some pretty big battles given the high point cost you can assign, like 700 at the maximum. I think it's 300 at the minimum, if I remember correctly, something off the top of my head. Human players are always going to give you a way better challenge overall, since the tactics play a large part in how the battles play. The AI is a bit hit and miss. Sometimes the AI are easily drawn into traps that you can set by making them fly into certain environmental objects, or just making them go the long way around so you can isolate them. Pathfinding can be a little wonky, notably Eldar ships who will just doggedly stick to a path you choose for them, and they will crash into everything unless you micromanage them each and every single time, which I've found personally to be quite annoying. I would have preferred it if they'd had a bit of self-preservation, so they would have tried to avoid hitting things like mines, flying into asteroid fields, or other ships. That would have been nice. It's hard to keep track of the Eldar when there's so much going on the screen. Still, the mission types were varied. You'll have to create a fleet for certain missions, like handling different ones better than others. Like a fleet that's geared with boarding craft are pretty good for assassination missions because they can cause engine damage and slow the ship down, or a fleet that's geared toward ranged combat can be very good at defending space stations or being able to defend the convoys and that kind of thing. So you can kind of tailor make, and there's enough slots that you can have like a cruiser for each mission type and a light cruiser for each mission type and so on. So while I was filming the review, I encountered one crash that was a fatal error that just crashed the desktop. Tindalos though are already aware of that, and they are recording crash reports and DirectX diags and stuff like that, so hopefully that'll be patched before release. Or on release. So outside of that issue though, which was quite rare, it wasn't a regular thing for me, I found the game ran very well. I had everything on Epic, barring anti-aliasing because my monitor doesn't really need it, and yeah, that was it. The game suffered only a single screen tear that was regular, that was pre-matched. They have a little cinematic, but if you either set VSync on or you just ignore that, it runs pretty smooth with no screen tear. So yeah, performance-wise, really, really good. And graphically, the game looks great. Ships are extremely detailed. The monolithic cathedrals and stuff on the Imperial ships, and all the sort of chains and like heathenistic iconography on the Chaos ships, and all the little graffiti and stuff on the Orc ones. Really, really cool. They dominate the scene when you zoom in. When they're moving around, you can just see so many little details. It's really nice, and it's fair to say that Tindalos have done a very good job with recreating the models from the tabletop game. The maps as well have very pretty skyboxes with things like black holes and weird chaos warp trails and all kinds of weird sort of objects just sort of hanging there ominously in the background. But sadly, I felt that the maps that you were playing in didn't really take advantage of any of these kind of environmental things. There's literally 2 dangerous environmental effects, which is asteroid fields, which slowly damage ships, and minefields that if you fly into them you take a fair chunk of damage. And then there's gas clouds, which you can use to hide, although the AI cheats and always knows where you are. Certain missions like assassination, defense, or data recovery, they always know where you are when you're on the defending team, which is kind of irritating. But yeah, maybe Tindalos can add a bit more sort of flavour to the maps, because I found the environments just really aren't that interesting after like 5 or 6 games. You've seen it. So that side, the actual visuals of the game are very, very good, and as I said, they've run very well. Sound-wise, I felt they did a very good job as well. We've had plenty of previous Warhammer games these days, 40k ones, that help to have already created a kind of sound for the universe, and they've kind of nailed down each faction very well with this. You can immediately tell what faction you're fighting against just on the sounds alone, be it the engine noises or the weapons. Each one is very distinct. Chaos weapons have this kind of screeching noise, like, you know, Souls of the Damned, like, railing against their imprisonment. And you've got Orc cannons have this, like, really loud mechanical clanging sound with each shot. It's really cool. Music is also pretty standard 40k stuff. A lot of operatic tones with a mix of orchestral stuff and very heavy, like, beats and stuff. If you've played like Space Marine, Dawn of War, those kind of games, it's along very, very similar lines. It's good, you know. If you like that kind of music and you feel it fits it, you know, you're not gonna have a problem with it. I also found the voice acting to be fine, but nothing that I was really blown away by. The only one I really remember was the Commissar, because whoever voiced him was just going hellbent for leather. He was chewing that scenery. It was amazing. I love that guy. So, yeah, in closing, overall, Battlefleet Gothic Armada is pretty fun. It has a nice long campaign, plenty of match sites to play with, both in skirmish and online. It's being supported post-launch as well with 2 free races for anyone who pre-orders or buys the game within first 2 months, 2 months of release. The first is the Space Marine, or as it's known as Astartes fleet, and the second one will, probably by the time of release, will have been announced, but that will also be free after the Astartes. So hopefully this will not be the end of that support, and we'll see more races and maybe match types as time goes on. I hope this game becomes a franchise in and of itself, with new campaigns maybe for each race, so you can get to play with all of them. It might not be the game though for the tabletop enthusiast, and I can see why you'd be disappointed if that was the case. It doesn't take away from the game, which does a very good job of bringing 40k space battles to life though on the PC. And yeah, if you don't mind that and you're a big fan of 40k stuff, I don't think you can go wrong with this. So yeah, thanks for watching everybody. Please remember to rate, comment and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Have a good week everyone. Critical Rocket, signing out.